Is real estate investing easy?
No, I don't think anyone who's actually done it would ever say. I do think it can be more simple. One of the biggest rebounds, we've seen in a long time since COVID, where it just bounced. If you had invested in anything in April to the end of the year, it just did phenomenal. Right? And so it was the exact opposite. Absolutely nobody, and I don't care who you are, you think you're just smarter than everyone else. You cannot comprehend all of the variables, what the government's going to do, what war is going to break out, what interest rates are going to do.
How do you define success? 15 years ago was a different idea. What's the idea today of success?
Autonomy and impact are success to me. Those two things. Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, and I think being able to control your days, because
Hi everybody, how you doing? This is Antonio Hernandez with FlipLatino Legendarios. Today I have the pleasure and honor to have one of my good friends and a long-time investor, Kirby Atwell. He has a podcast. Also, he has a community, Living of Rental. Kirby, thank you for coming to FlipLatino Legendarios.
Absolutely. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, great. I think, a lot of people, usually they want to know, how do you start this business? At the beginning, and I know you for a long time. How do you start it? How do you start in real estate?
Yeah. I started anything and not knowing what I was doing. I left the military in 2011, and that's really when I jumped into it with both feet. And I'd been in the Army, and I served as an officer for 6 years. And I knew when I was in the Army, I had this strong interest to be an entrepreneur and get into real estate. And I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I was working at a job in Japan. I was a commander of a homeland defense site, and I decided I'm going to get out. I'm going to go back home to Chicago, and I'm going to figure out how to get into real estate. And so I did, and I jumped into it full time. I was going to school at the same time, so kind of, working my business during the day, going to school at night, and just started flipping houses because I didn't really have any financing options at the time for long-term rentals or anything.
Yeah.
And so I decided just to start flipping houses, and I partnered with a couple friends, and we started flipping houses around Chicago. And it started really slow. It took a long time to get our first deal. And then we started doing multiple deals at the same time. And over the next 5 years, we flipped about 70 houses around the Chicagoland area.
How difficult was that? Do you take any courses? How do you start doing flipping? And do you have any mentors or anybody who can, help you? As this business is not as easy as it seems, right?
Yeah, exactly. We went to just about every seminar and course that we could find in the beginning. Some were much better than others. There were some that, it's just some guy teaching it who's not actually ever done it, I don't think. And then there's others that were really hands-on, really good and valuable. But you kind of take what you can use and then discard the rest. And so we started going to classes while we were doing it. And really, you can't learn everything before you do it. You got to just get in there and start doing deals. And we learned a lot doing deals. We made a lot of mistakes. I could probably write a book about all the contractor issues and lessons learned. Each one got a little bit better, and so you incorporate those mistakes and get burned a few times, and you realize next time I'm not going to do it that way. And so over time, you incorporate those things and they get better.
Yeah. So you talk about, people needs to start doing it in some time. A lot of people, they trying to learn everything, and then try to do this business. How different is, just to learn than to actually doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we used to run a real estate, my partners and I, it was in the suburbs of Chicago. We ran it. It was in Lombard. And so I remember part of the meetup, which I love meetups, I think they're great, but part of the time would break off into groups and we would network, so go around and talk about what it is you're doing and how you can help others and what you're looking for. And I remember distinctly meeting in one of these groups, and there's a guy talking about what he was looking for, and it was very general, and what he was looking for is just like a good deal, basically, is what he's saying. And then what he's doing, and he's like, well, I'm building my power team. I'm getting my attorney in place, my contractors, my lenders. And he kept talking about his power team that he's building. And then a year later, running into the same guy, and it was at a conference, and I asked him, like, what are you working on? What deals have you done? He's like, well, almost finished building my power team. I think you're losing the point of a power team. Like, the power team comes when you start doing when you need that. Like, you can call up an attorney and say, you want to be on my power team? And they're like, but call me when you get a deal, because like it does nothing for me to be on your power team until you do deals. I think people can tend to focus on the wrong things. Like, you want to get everything in place and know everything before you take a step forward and do a deal. Really, what you need to do is just like start with a small deal, get your experience, and that's going to start to help you build your power team, and you can start doing bigger deals then, and it kind of progresses from there.
So you think people should take action, even while they're learning, because otherwise, you're not going to get the experience.
Absolutely.
What would you say to people who just starting and they're, I don't know, taking the first classes or going to the first conference?
Yeah, I would say don't be like a baseball player walking into a MLB stadium, and that's the first time you've ever swung at a pitch, right? Like, you're going to strike out big time, and you're going to look horrible. Instead, walk into a little league park and take a swing at your first pitch. You can hit that, and it's the same thing with real estate. You don't need to do a grand slam deal right out of the gate that's $1 million or multi-million-dollar deal that's going to profit you $1 million right from the start, because there's probably it's going to be complex. You're going to need a lot of capital. It's going to be a lot of unknowns, as opposed to if you find, say, a $50,000 or $100,000 property that you can fix up and then start renting out, or you can fix up and owner finance it, and do a lease to own, or you can flip it. There's all these different options. And on a small deal like that, there's so many end users, there's so many buyers, so many renters. It's just a massive pool, as opposed to the high-end deal where it's a very small pool and they're very specific around what they want. So I would just say, get your feet wet and start doing little deals, and those will lead to bigger deals, I promise you. But you can't just expect to jump into this, extremely complex high-end deal that's going to profit you, and retire you on your first deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you and I both know that, Monopoly, they don't make money on the big deals, right? They make money in the small deals usually. When you start the business as flipper, because I know you evolved, no? But how big there were your deals? How did you start it? And in the process, you guys got burned. What mistakes you think you guys made that they can help somebody else?
Yeah, our progression was very similar to many flippers that I see out there. And I see them following the same progression and making the same mistakes that we made. And we made a lot of them. But the biggest thing that we did is we started doing what I just described, like do small deals. And it worked. And so, our first few deals, they worked great. And so we added a few more. But what we realized is with active investments, say one-time, so we're not investing really. It's more of like creating a job. And the job just happens to be that we're selling flips that we did. Paid once and you go better, and the next day you better have another deal lined up, or else you're not going to be able to pay your bills, right? Yeah. And so it was very, very time intensive, energy intensive, and just transactional. And our mistake, and what I see a lot of people do, is they start to run the numbers and they're like, I'm doing okay with these small flips, but if I do much bigger deal, higher end properties, and I do a lot more of them, then the numbers look really good on a spreadsheet. The problem is that the spreadsheet doesn't always translate to real life. We went from middle-class suburbs where there's a massive buyer pool, like I talked about, and you could have the cheapest stainless steel appliances that look really nice, and that's totally acceptable. And there's tons and tons of buyers that want that, to the high-end suburbs where we could buy $1 million properties and, hopefully flip them for $1.5 million or $2 million. But the cost of Viking appliances compared to Frigidaire stainless steel appliances is not like twice as much. It's like 10 to 15 times as much, And then that buyer pool is extremely small and very specific on what they want. And so we started doing a whole bunch of those and realizing that the margins got really compressed really quickly. And it took a lot more capital. And so after a while, after 5 years and doing 70 deals, we realized this, it's not worth the amount of time and stress and effort. And what we really wanted, or what, I realized I wanted personally, was to create recurring cash flow. That was what was going to lead to freedom. And so that's when I transitioned in 2016 to the rental model.
What do you think was your, do you have, I don't know, a most expensive financial mistake in these 5 years?
We did a map. It's kind of interesting. We created a map and put a pin where all of our properties were. And then we looked at the ROI, what we made on the properties. We put a red pin for ones we either broke even or lost money on, or maybe we made a little bit, but it was very low margin. Then a yellow for, we made a little bit, and then green for like home run. Every single deal that we did downtown Chicago was red. And it was amazing. Like you would think you'd have to make do some good deals in the city. All the yellow and green were in the suburbs. Most of them were in the south or west suburbs, were middle class suburbs. There was some red up in the north suburbs because we were doing these massive rehabs either in the city or in the north suburbs where you do like a one story, you do the pop top where you add on a second story, and the amount of things that can go wrong, it's a lot. And then also the big thing in the city was the bureaucrats, dealing with the permit process. Exactly. First time we did a deal. So I think the biggest or costliest mistakes, one doesn't stand out. All of them in the city, just like so much time and so much effort that was unnecessary, and it led to very low margins.
Yeah. So after all these deals, what was the, let's say, single or many decisions, that make you change, the trajectory from flipping to rentals or Airbnb? You went right away to Airbnb, or you did rentals first?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So in 2016, I realized I was going to be on this treadmill forever. I always had to find these new deals, get one payment, and then on to the next one. I realized I wanted to build cash flow, wanted to buy assets that would appreciate over time and pay me in the meantime. And so I did start buying long-term rentals, initially in the south suburbs of Chicago, where you could rent relatively high for a very low cost property. But then I realized we moved over to Northwest Indiana across the border where the taxes were much lower. And so I realized I could still buy really low cost properties, but I could rent them as short-term rentals or mid-term rentals, and they would bring in a much higher income on a monthly basis. So I switched to this model of buying these smaller multi-unit short-term rentals. So, 2 or 3 units in one property, whether it was a single family house with an ADU in the back or was a 2 or 3 unit. But when you have elevated, really high income per unit because it's short-term rental income, and then you have 3 units on one property that's really affordable, it just leads to extremely high net cash flow that you can live off of. So that was the biggest driver. I didn't know that I could do that, and then tried some long-term rentals, and then we moved over here and tried it in our basement first. We tried a short-term rental and it worked great. Started trying it on separate houses and then these small multi-units, and we were able to build up financial freedom pretty quickly from those type of assets.
Yeah, I know, and I hear the story that is you start renting your basement and then you realize that it was bringing money. So how did that start?
Yeah. Again, not knowing anything, we have a tendency to just kind of jump in and figure it out. Okay. But we bought a house in Beverly Shores, which is right on the southern tip of Lake Michigan in Indiana. And we were going to rehab the whole house. It was 1970s, the green shed and wood paneling. It's looked like 1975. And so it needed a full rehab. So rehabbing it had this unfinished basement. And we're like finishing this and just having it space that we don't use very often. Why not finish it and turn it into a separate apartment? A door between our house and the base, or we installed a door between the basement apartment and our house. And so it was blocked off, totally separate apartment. And we started renting that out as a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. And we booked it the first year, this was back in 2017, from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And it made just over $20,000 in that first summer. on this little 1-bedroom apartment. And we're like, I got whole houses that are rental houses that don't make that much. And so we didn't know what to say to guests or, how to hire cleaners or, how to price it. But we kind of just jumped in and started doing it and realized there was so much demand for it that we still made a lot of money. We probably could have made a lot more actually had we known stuff, but my wife cleaned it in between cleanings. She was home with our 1-year-old and I was working full time. And so we just figured it out as we went, but we saw how much potential there was with that property. And so we realized, okay, this is something that we can scale.
Kirby, there's a lot of people trying to do different businesses, they see real estate, they think it's easy. I mean, how difficult was for you because you see the potential on Airbnb, how long it took you to, let's say, the business?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think the downfall of a lot of people, and it goes back to what I was talking about with flipping and, with doing big deals, people want to scale immediately. It's very hard to scale realistically because there's just a lot of moving parts. But real estate does scale really well organically over time. For us, you did that first one for the first 2 summers and we were like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Let's start looking in other areas. So we started looking at Michigan City, which is a town next door. As we can buy really inexpensive properties. The rent was about the same, the nightly rate was about the same and there was a lot of demand. And so we started buying some there. And it wasn't like we went out and bought 50 properties right away. It was like you buy one, make sure it works, test the model, works really well. And then we buy another and then we try a small multi-unit with 2 units, and then we tried a 3-unit, and we just did a 5-unit, just a few months ago. So we've organically added units, and initially it was us cleaning, it was us finding it was us talking to the guests, everything. Now on a daily basis, we have virtual team members that are based in the Philippines that do all of the day-to-day. They talk to the guests, they take the bookings, they line up the cleaners, they line up the handyman. We have boots on the ground, a really good handyman and cleaning team that does all the cleanings. And we have economies of scale in the same area. They can clean 3-4 properties in one day. So they love it. They get a lot out of that. We get a lot out of that. So we couldn't have built this whole system by buying all of our properties all at once. We just did one at a time. And each one was very profitable. So it's, people will buy 50 of them that don't make a whole lot of money. And they're like, well, I'm going to have 50. So now I'll be rich, because I have a lot of doors. And it's like each door needs to make money on its own and be really good. So my advice would be just grow it slowly, but steadily. Make sure each deal you buy works. If not, sell it, move on to the next one and build a really strong portfolio that way. And then your systems can grow with the size of the portfolio.
Sure. I hear you talk about systems and VAs and all this stuff. How do you come up with the team, your power team in this case?
Yeah.
To start putting together. It's just one day you wake up and say, "Oh, I'm gonna put a power team and I'm gonna put systems," or it was something that it was coming along while the business was growing.
Yeah, exactly. It's organic growth that we would put the team members in place as needed. Like as we outgrew, the properties outgrew us, that's when we put the next team member in. Very quickly after we did our basement short-term rental, we realized cleaning the properties probably isn't the best use of our time. We should be looking for more deals. So we started finding cleaners. And then we realized I can't do the handyman stuff. I need a really good handyman that we can call up, and he's local. He can do anything, when the guest is there or between bookings. And then we started growing more cleaners. And as we got to 4 or 5 properties, that's when we were like, okay, we have enough scale. We have enough income now from the properties that bringing on a part-time virtual team member to start taking the bookings and responding to guests so that we don't have to be on call all the time. In the middle of our dinner, we don't have to respond to a guest. Just made a lot of sense. And it was a very low cost investment, as opposed to right from the start saying, I'm going to pay a property manager 20 to 25%, which is what short-term rental property managers cost, to take all this right away. Because we grew it organically and slowly, it cost us way, way less. And then that person could grow with us. So as we added more deals, and they went from part-time to full-time. And then we added more deals and we added another one. And so now we have 39 short-term rental listings.
Okay.
And all of which are very, very profitable. And we have 4 full-time virtual team members that are extremely affordable because, we did them as we went, and they're located in the Philippines, which is a lower cost of living. But we couldn't have just set all that up from the start. Like we couldn't have bought 39 and said, okay, now we need a great team in place. And it would have been very dysfunctional. So growing it slowly and organically again is, I think, the way to go.
Yeah. So now you have 39 properties, bringing what the numbers look like.
Yeah. So it's 39 listings.
Okay.
And if we buy, say, a 3-unit, we'll actually get 4 listings out of that. So we'll get a listing for each unit, and then we have what we call a super listing for the whole building.
Okay.
The reason I love these small multi-units is because of the versatility. So in the busy season, that super listing for the whole building books up really well because it's a lot of big groups that travel, big families, friend groups. They're on vacation. They want to book a whole, they don't want to stay in 3 different hotels. They want to book a whole place that sleeps 20 people. But in the off season, it's small groups. It's couples. It's a small family. So we can book out each individual unit. We have 39 listings. I think it's like 15 or 16 different actual buildings. And that brings it, last year we brought in 1.2 million from that of income. And we operate on, around a 60% expense ratio. So about 40% of that is profit. It might be a little bit higher than that now. Maybe it's 65%, but they're very, very profitable. A lot of net cash flow because of this small multi-unit strategy.
Okay. You mentioned that, your wife helps a lot. Usually our wives are the ones who, starting with. In this question, do you see a lot of husband and wife, working together toward this business? Or how do you see, couples working in this environment?
Yeah, that's a great question too. We got married in 2015. And at the time, I was flipping heavily, just thinking about getting into long-term rentals. My wife, she was in marketing, no interest in real estate. I mean, she was very supportive of me doing it, but she was like, she had no interest in getting into it. And doesn't like spreadsheets. And, when I was in flipping and long-term rentals, she wasn't really involved. We got into this strategy, and this is what I see with a lot of couples with short-term rentals. Your strengths tend to complement each other as couples. So I still love finding deals. I love working with the contractors, but she is great at furnishing the properties, creating the vision, talking to the guests. We kind of shine in different areas. And I see that all the time. I coach people on how to do this really successfully. And it's a lot of couples that are working together and cover different parts of the business.
Yeah. Do you think the female partner or the women's, more likely to come into shorter rentals and see that they can, beautify a house, and they like it?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, and I know there's exceptions to that, but generally that's what I see. The women really love the design component of it, and can make it their own. And I think that's awesome.
So for somebody who wants to do shorter rentals and wants to get into this business, what is your suggestion? Should they take a course, a class, or something that you can learn as you go?
Yeah. I think the thing that I've noticed is if you want the highest return on investment and the highest cash flow, short-term rentals are super counterintuitive. Like a good short-term rental, usually not the most profitable short-term rental. Most people are drawn toward the really high-end, sexy properties, up in the mountains or on the beach. Typically, they're single-family homes with lots of amenities, extremely expensive, and people just assume because it looks nice, it's beautiful, it's got the amenities, I'll make money. And so they pay this huge amount of money and then realize there's a ton of competition and their expenses and overhead is super high. So we have a very specific niche. I don't see very many people adopting where we buy, again, these smaller multi-units in more affordable areas. You can buy really inexpensively. There's still a lot of demand because you're close to population and there's people traveling for weddings, funerals, like non-leisure activities and leisure activities. And so the cash flow is super high. So if you're thinking about getting into this, I'd say start by running the numbers, understand the numbers and look at where you can get the highest income, the highest nightly rate and occupancy compared to the lowest purchase price. And that's what I teach. can certainly go out and start running the numbers yourself and do this. If you're looking for support on this and you're looking for somebody to walk you through it step by step, I'm happy to do that as well. I have a program that's a very specific step-by-step program where I walk you through the whole process. I would just say focus on numbers first and not feeling, because it's very easy to get caught up in the emotion of a short-term rental.
Yeah, no, I understand. I took your class and I learned some stuff. I think everybody has their own niche, right? That they try to do it, and it's okay, right? But I think it's a very good class. Why, somebody will rent a property, that is not close to the beach, the mountain. I mean, still people, are traveling for short rental is for vacation.
Yeah, great question. 500 million bookings last year on Airbnb alone. So think about that, like 500 million bookings on one site. That doesn't include Vrbo. It doesn't include bookings.com or direct bookings. Sure. So you think about that, like there are so many reasons people book. Like most people, again, back to thinking, well, it's got to be a high-end vacation. That's the only reason people book Airbnbs. It is literally every reason you could ever think of. Any reason why someone would stay in a hotel, they would book a Airbnb because they're getting a whole apartment or a whole house, oftentimes cheaper than the hotel. So it can be weddings, it can be funerals, it can be visiting family, type of non-leisure activity, traveling for work. Right now we have at least like probably 10 different people who are booking for 30 plus day stays in our units for work, or their company booked it. So leisure is, a lot of our bookings in the off season, and then in the peak season, there's a lot of people on vacation. It's leisure. It's people going to the beach. It's people just wanting to get away for a week when their kids are off school. And so we can maximize both seasons with the right type of property.
Why will somebody, let's say, Airbnb against a hotel room? Because some people will not understand. Well, why would I go out to a Airbnb and book something like that if there is hotels?
Yeah. So I think there's two main reasons for different types of people. Right now, I'm sitting on our farm. So we live on a 45-acre farm in Valparaiso, and we have this barn that came with the farm when we bought it. And it's this big pole barn. So we finished this whole pole barn. I put my office in one side of it, and then we put an Airbnb behind me on the other side. So right now we have a 6-week booking in that Airbnb from a guy who's like a 25-year-old guy. He's a contractor for the steel mill because there's U.S. Steel down the road here. And he's from Mississippi. And so he could have come here and booked a hotel. There's hotels around here, but he's here for 6 weeks. And so he didn't really want to live in a hotel for 6 weeks and not have a kitchen. He'd have to eat out every time. It'd just be a really tight room. And on the weekends when he's off, he would be just sitting in this hotel room. So instead he booked our apartment. It's not a huge apartment, but it's a 1-bedroom apartment. There's a gym right next door. Like we have a home gym here that we created that our guests can use. It's got laundry in it. He's got all the amenities of a really comfortable apartment, but it's about the same price. So I see that with traveling workers all the time. We book to a lot of traveling workers, contractors, construction workers that just don't want to live in a hotel. And then the other group is families. We have 4 kids, and if we travel, we're not staying in a hotel. It's just too many people. 6 people in a hotel room is just way too much. So we're looking for Airbnbs. We use it. And so that's what I see a lot with a lot of our bookings, and especially in the summertime, when people are traveling for fun or visiting family or whatever, they're booking a Airbnb over a hotel because, you'd have to book a couple hotels if you had a, kids and a large family.
Yeah. How do you see the Airbnb business these days? Is still as strong as, 3 years ago? Is it changing?
That's a great question. What I've noticed is that there's a lot of headlines right now around Airbnb is, dying and Airbnb bust. And you can't look at all Airbnbs as the same. Again, there was a 500 million bookings last year. So they're very location specific. But if you're buying just in general, if you're buying in the mainstream areas, I talk to people every day who are losing money. Like they're just feeding their Airbnbs because it's become so much more competitive. Nightly rates have dropped off. Occupancy rates have dropped off. You need to have every amenity to get bookings now. And it's a tough place to compete. And prices have gone way up. Interest rates are higher. So I don't know how people are buying in these mainstream areas. And there's still realtors trying to convince people, and they do convince people every day, but I don't know how they sleep at night because, they get them into these properties that don't make any money. And it becomes this thing they have to feed. If you look in these more affordable areas, you can buy properties, like we'll buy a 3-unit that's turnkey for $300,000 in our market. It's a beautiful property. And that property, each unit, if it's bringing in a few $1,000s per month, you add that up times 3, that's a lot of income for a $300,000 property. So you're left with a lot of net cash flow. So yeah, I think if you bought the wrong Airbnb, it can be a struggle right now, because back 3 years ago, right after COVID, or 4 years ago, anyone could rent anything out and make a killing. But now there's a lot more competition, especially in the mainstream areas.
You buy an Airbnb, are you looking for properties that they already done, or you're still following, the buying, rehabbing a little bit, and then, increase the value?
We'll still do rehabs just because I've done so many. I've probably done over 200 rehabs at this point, and I've got a really great crew that I work with, that I don't need to be there, telling them what to do every day. They're very independent because we've worked on so many. That being said, I don't recommend a big rehab in the beginning. If you buy in the right area and you buy a relatively inexpensive property that brings in really high net cash flow, I think it's way better to buy something turnkey that you can start cash flowing from day one and make several $1,000s a month of net cash flow after all your expenses. And by the time you would have been done with the rehab 6 months or 9 months down the road, you've already accumulated a massive amount of cash flow. So I think it's just better to buy something turnkey and start cash flowing right away, as opposed to trying to take the risk to build a little bit of equity, hopefully through a rehab. You never know how that's going to go, especially if you're brand new to it.
What kind of mistakes do you see for beginners, when they buy the first short-term rent?
I'd say the hardest thing for me working with people is to convince people to change their mind around what looks like a good Airbnb compared to what makes the most money. So most beginners I talk to have this vision when they get into short-term rentals of like, I want to have something at the beach that my family can use as well. And if you do, that's great. I'm not against that. There's a place for that, but just understand that you're probably going to trade the fact that you're not maximizing your cash flow for the fact that it's, in the prime location, and, that's driven up pricing. And so it's going to be tougher to make much money on a monthly basis. I think that's probably the biggest mistake, is just buying the wrong type of property. And you can't fix that. Unfortunately, like once you own the property, you own the property. There's other things you can fix, like furnishings or your pictures or, things like that. But just starting with the right type of deal. One of the first multi-units I bought was a 2-unit property that near the beach, like in an area that realtor was like, you're going to do what with this? You're going to try to make this a vacation rental? And I was like, yeah, I'm running the numbers and it just seems like it works. I got it for $22,000 because it was rented out and it had terrible tenants. It needed a full rehab. So we bought it for $22,000, put $100,000 in, knowing that the fundamentals of it, even if I had to use it as a long-term rental, it's still going to make money. So I was going to test it because it seemed like the numbers would make a lot of sense as a short-term rental. I didn't know if it would work next to train tracks. So we created the listing, and we were very clear in the listing. This is close to train tracks. We provide sound machines next to, in all the bedrooms. So if you're a light sleeper, this probably isn't the place for you. But, most people say it's not, they can't really hear the train. And we've had it booked out. That property makes right around $65,000 a year. We've had that one for years and years. And so $120,000, like going back to just buying the right property, it's hard to screw that up. Every month we get a few $1,000s of net cash flow after all our expenses are paid, and it just keeps giving. And in the meantime, it's probably worth $250,000 now. So we have just over $100,000 into it, and it's more than doubled in value. While it was doubling in value, it was paying us several $1,000s a month.
Okay.
A really fundamentally sound property, and not speculating and hoping that you're buying a property that will go up over time, but yet you're going to lose money every month in the meantime.
Yeah. So, Kirby, what numbers are non-negotiable when you buy an Airbnb?
My rule of thumb for purchasing is 1% net cash flow. So for me, that's the non-negotiable. If I'm buying a property for, say, $300,000, then I need to make a net cash flow after all my expenses, $3,000 a month of net cash flow. People who are used to long-term rentals are right now saying that's insane. There's no way you can buy properties like that. And even people buying short-term rentals think that that's crazy if they're buying single family. Because single family, again, like if you have one unit worth of income coming in, it's very difficult to make those numbers work. If I'm buying, say, a 3-unit for $300,000, that could easily bring in $8,000 a month of net cash or of gross income. And so then if my expenses are, $5,000 a month between my mortgage, tax, cleaner, lawn maintenance, my utilities, all that stuff is $5,000. That means I have $3,000 coming in left over that I can pay my bills off. I can buy groceries. I can live off that income. So that's why 1% net is such a great rule of thumb. To make $3,000 a month on a $300,000 property is great. To make $3,000 a month on a $1.5 million property, not so great. So it always goes up and down in conjunction with the purchase price of the property. And for me, that's my metric that I purchase based off.
Yeah, no, and it sounds good. How do you manage regulatory risk, city laws and stuff? Can you still do Airbnb anywhere? What's the idea there?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's changing all the time. But what I found, and this is, again, we buy just outside of larger cities. One more reason, it's more affordable, but we also see a lot less regulation. So like right now we live an hour outside of Chicago. We can buy a turnkey 3-unit for $300,000 that would be over $1 million in the, prime location in downtown Chicago. And you'd only be able to rent one of those units as a short-term rental in Chicago. They restrict you to 1 out of 4 units. Where we're at, there's no restrictions. Like we can rent all 4 units or 3 units or whatever it is, short-term rentals, which drastically increases the income. And our nightly rates aren't that much different. It's crazy. Like you think, well, I'm paying over $1 million for a 3-unit, so the nightly rates are going to be just so much higher. It may be 20% higher or 30% higher, but we're getting the property for a third of or a fourth of just outside of the city, and we don't have to deal with any of the restrictions. That's why I think if you target smaller towns, not necessarily small towns, but smaller, not major cities where the hotel lobbyists have, created a lot of restrictions and paid off all the politicians, I would target, the suburbs or the surrounding areas where there's still a lot of demand, but you're getting a great deal and the regulation is much, much less.
Yeah. So, what would you recommend to people who trying to get into Airbnb but they don't know regulations? How can they find out if the city or the allows them to have Airbnb and what the rules are?
Yeah, I would start at the state level to see how short-term rental friendly is the state, because some states are trying to restrict it. There's other states like Indiana where we're at, or Tennessee or Florida, that have made rules that say local municipalities cannot ban short-term rentals. They can make restrictions around safety and certain things, but they can't ban them. So from a state level, you're in a very short-term rental. And then look at the county level and look at the city level, and even municipality, like local DIPs or HOAs have their own rules. You can, just a Google search typically can help you find that information about the town that you're thinking about. And then I would verify it with the city. A lot of times people still do short-term rentals. A city will ban it or they'll make a bunch of rules. And it's very difficult to enforce because it's not like your address is listed on Airbnb. If there's a lot of them, a lot of times don't have the manpower to enforce it. And then the punishment is, it's not really that big of a deterrent. So I would just say, do that research first. I don't recommend buying in areas that are restricted because you're always trying to fly under the radar. It's easier just to buy in areas that don't have strict restrictions. It's pretty easy to find these days.
Yeah. Kirby, your business, what system processes are giving you the most, let's say, time freedom? Having a VA, having a power team. What kind of system?
Yeah. Initially, Airbnb is all you need. If you're just buying one, Airbnb has taken so many third-party softwares that were invented to complement Airbnb, and they've just incorporated it in to the app. Like automated messaging. When a guest, is about to check in, it sends your check-in instructions automatically, check-out instructions automatically. Automatic pricing helps you keep your calendar competitive. A lot of stuff is just automatic. It's built into Airbnb. With one property, that's all you need. As you grow, and I think, I mean, a great cleaner and handyman team is the first people to put in place. So you never physically have to be at that property. We have properties in Florida. We have properties in Indiana, 20 minutes down the road. We treat them exactly the same. I have properties 20 minutes down the road I haven't visited in couple years. And then eventually the virtual team is the next step. And once that virtual team is in place, we work a few hours a week on 39 deals. We actually work much, much harder having our basement apartment, if you can believe it, than we do with 39 listings, which is crazy to think about. But our systems have evolved to a point where we just don't have to be involved in the day-to-day anymore, which is really nice to get to.
What would you say, is the part or Airbnb business that is more underestimated, that people don't think is a, great idea?
Well, I can share like an example of a great deal that, most people would never even. We have a member who, he's a former Air Force guy, and he wanted to get into this. He lives in LA, California, and he wanted to get, buy properties at cash flow. And so, you look in LA and you could buy a doghouse for like $500,000. So he knew he couldn't buy anything around him. And so we started working together, and I started walking him through the process, and he identified a town that I had never heard of called Sault Ste. Marie. It's right on the border of Canada and Michigan. It's a border town, and it's a huge crossing into Canada and the U.S. It's a relatively small town. It's in Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but they're building like crazy because there's so many people that go through there to go between the countries. And so they're building a lot of infrastructure there. There's a lot of construction, but the average purchase price is like $160,000. And so from LA, he bought this property. It's a turnkey 2-unit property. He made it look gorgeous. It's beautiful. He hired a local staging company to, shit and everything. Got professional pictures, and he was all in for like just over $200,000 for this property. It's 2-unit property, and it just stays booked up like crazy. 2-bedroom units, and so that's an example to your point of like underestimated area. Most people wouldn't think Upper Peninsula Michigan is like the prime Airbnb, like because he bought it so inexpensively, and because there's construction happening, there's so much travel between the countries, it's just a perfect spot where there's constantly need for lodging, so he can be that need, and it cash flows really, really well.
So basically, people need to look for ideas or look for opportunities, right? Because maybe they know the town, maybe they hear about something going on. So how do people find out about these good deals or to do Airbnb?
Yeah. So you don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere and hope that people are going to show up. That's the biggest thing. People are like, oh, Indiana sounds like a great place to invest. I'd say 90% of Indiana is cornfields, and it would not be a good place to invest. Where we're an hour outside of Chicago. So Indiana is a great place because it's low tax, it's really inexpensive, but you're close to a big population. And so I would say start with the Midwest, primarily, Southeast as well. But those are the areas where it's just really inexpensive, but there's lots of people. There's big cities. So look around the big cities where you're still close to population. There's still people traveling for every reason imaginable, but there's also some local draws to those areas. And if you start looking through, we have a guy buying in Duluth, Minnesota. It's right on the lake. Beautiful area, super affordable, close to population. That's a good example. Outside of Milwaukee is another, great place to do this. And there's suburbs of Chicago that can work. Your taxes are pretty high, but, we have quite a few people investing outside of Chicago, outside of Detroit, Cleveland, all these different towns throughout the Rust Belt and Midwest where it's really inexpensive to buy, but there's lots of people. Those are the perfect places to start.
What states do you think are, very good for Airbnb, with laws and with affordability, and for people who's looking to do something? Let's say Florida. I don't know, which ones do you think?
Yeah, right now I think Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio all are just And like I said, very few parts of Indiana can work too. The rates in most of Indiana are super low, so it doesn't make it worthwhile. As a whole, along the Great Lakes, even in New York, upstate New York, like Rochester, Buffalo, areas just outside of those big cities, it's super affordable. That can work really well. So the Rust Belt, I think those states in the Rust Belt there just work really, really well.
And the financing side, how do you finance these properties? You still use hard money lenders? You still use DSCR loan? What are you using?
Yeah, great question. Again, going back to why we started in flipping, when I got out of the Army in 2011, DSCR loans really didn't exist. I mean, there was basically conventional and there was commercial. And so that's why I started flipping, because I couldn't do this strategy back then, just from a financing perspective. Now, we're very fortunate that you can go out, anyone, can go out. We haven't had a full-time job in 5 years, my wife and I, and we get DSCR loans all the time because you can go out and get a DSCR loan, which is very similar to conventional, a 30-year fixed rate, slightly higher interest rate than a conventional. It's based off the income from that property. And now DSCR lenders will do long-term or short-term. So we just, on every single property we own, we have a DSCR loan. Sometimes we have a private lender who will put down the down payment and cover the furnishing cost if we don't have that as well. And so it allows us to scale as big as we want without having the restriction of you can only do 10 conventional loans, or, you have to have a high DTI, debt to income ratio. None of that matters with the DSCR loan.
Yeah, no, and we understand that because we do financing. We do the hard money loans and DSCR. We have a company who does that. Why people doesn't know that sometimes you don't need a job. You say you haven't had a job in 5 years. W-2 or income taxes. Most of the time it's just the property. Need to make sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Because most people are used to conventional, and that's based off of you, like me paying that loan back. So they want to look at me personally. How much money do I make? Sure. I'm the borrower. I'm the one servicing the loan. A DSCR lender doesn't care about me. They care about the real estate, because that's what's servicing the loan, the income from that real estate. And so if you follow this strategy, it has super, super high income compared to the purchase price. And so it's really attractive to a DSCR lender, because they're like, man, it makes so much money on a monthly basis. We're in a very low risk. And so that's why it doesn't matter what your income is or assets are.
You use buy?
Most of them, almost all of them are an LLC. We set up an LLC and purchase that way. DSCR lenders generally like it to be in an LLC. Sure. Conventional lenders are the opposite. They want it in your personal name. So our personal property, we used a VA loan because I'm a veteran to purchase this farm, and we've got an Airbnb on it. But beyond that, I highly recommend setting up LLCs and separating out your business assets from your personal.
Yeah. So you recommend people who are investing, whether it's fix and flip, rental, or Airbnb, is to be in a business, because it's a business, right? Great. How do you see the market these days? Everything is going on. They think we're in a recession, but we don't know. I mean, people still spending. What do you see? How do you see 2016?
Yeah. I've been asked this question, I think, except that I look back at the most sophisticated investors and the people who have the most amount of information, and look at their predictions. For example, last April, there's all the tariff discussion, right? And so the market just crashed in April. And Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of Chase Bank, came out with his prediction. He said, I think it was like a 90% chance we're going to be in a recession by the end of the year. The economy is just going to struggle. This is a guy who has the most amount of information. I mean, every statistic, access to the smartest people in the world, and he was dead wrong. And along with him, everyone follows along and says, we're going to be in a recession. If one of the biggest rebounds we've seen in a long time since COVID, where it just bounced. If you had invested in anything in April to the end of the year, I mean, it just did phenomenal. Right? And so it was the exact opposite. Absolutely nobody, and I don't care who you are, if you think you're just smarter than everyone else, you cannot comprehend all of the variables, what the government's going to do, what war is going to break out, what interest rates are going to do. There's too many things that impact where the market's going to go. So instead, what I started doing is looking at fundamentals and just looking at deals that I'm like, what's the worst case, the downside? What does that look like? And then what's the best case? That's what I love about this strategy is like, I'm buying properties that I know in a worst case scenario I can rent out as long-term rentals and they still cash flow well. But in the meantime, I'm going to rent them as short-term rentals and they cash flow really, really, really well. And I know that the underlying asset, I couldn't even build it for what I'm buying it for. So I know it's got a ton of value to the property itself, and that just will go up long-term because of inflation over time. I don't really care what the market does anymore because I'm like, if it went to 50% of what it is tomorrow, I'm still financially free. I'm still bringing in just as much income. I know 20 years from now, all my properties will be worth at least double as long as, we have 3-4% inflation. I just buy based off sound fundamentals.
Yeah. What do you think, Kirby? People still, looking to buy. What would you say to people who think if it's a good idea to start buying now, later, or it was 5 years ago? What would you say to them?
I've interviewed about 340 people on my podcast, and I asked them, what's the biggest mistake you've made? Almost every one of them says, I just wish I started sooner. And it doesn't matter if they started investing last year or they started investing, 20 years ago. They wish they had started 21 years ago. Like, again, going back to inflation, values will be 20 years from now, much, much higher. I promise you that. And it's hard to believe because when we started, like I was buying properties back 15 years ago that I'm like, there's no way this could go up. Like I see what people are making in their jobs. Like they wouldn't be able to afford it. It went up a lot. I wish I owned any of those properties. So, you'll look back and say that was so affordable when I thought it was expensive. So I'd say start yesterday if you can, but if not, start today.
What would you suggest to these people? Start going out and start buying. Let's say they have to have some information, study the market, research, have a mentor. What would you suggest?
I think I've thought about this a lot. Like I said, we invested in a lot of education initially.
Sure.
And again, like a lot of it was very valuable. Some of it was garbage. I think there's so much information. YouTube didn't exist. In 2011, it was cat videos. There was no like real estate information on YouTube. Now you can get so much free information from YouTube and from podcasts just to explore the exploration phase. Sure. Just like pick any random property, like do a little bit of exploration just to understand what type of strategy do I want? And then once you identify the type of strategy and the type of properties you're looking to buy, you can find someone who's done that, who's really experienced in that specific structure, that specific strategy. And then do what they say, hire them as a mentor or follow them or whatever it is and do what's worked. Because that's when mentorship becomes valuable. I don't think it's valuable in the beginning just to learn the basics because the basics are out there. But it's super valuable once you determine the direction you want to go. And so I think a combination of finding the right mentor and then just starting small with your first property and moving forward, to get some experience. I think those two things are really, really great first steps.
And people probably will ask, and say, okay, so he managed 39 properties right now. Any of these days, do you come up and say, well, I don't know what to do? How do you manage the fear, or scaling up, to the next level? Because you started with 1 and now 39, so it's a bigger problem, or good problem.
Yeah. I tell you, I've bought, over the years, including all the flips and everything, like I said, probably over 200 properties over the last 15 years. Every one of them, you still have that, question in the back of your head of like, what am I not looking at before you close? Like as soon as you get under contract, you're like, okay, did I make a mistake? Am I paying too much? So you always will have some hesitation. But again, go back to the fundamentals. I'm not buying based off speculation. If I was, I wouldn't sleep at night. And there's a lot of people who do that. They buy and they're like, well, if everything goes right and the market improves 10% or 15% this year, and I'll make a ton of money. But if it doesn't, I don't have a backup plan here. And that's how people got crushed in '08. And so I don't ever buy those type of properties. I know that if '08 happened tomorrow, I'm still going to be okay. It's not going to be fun, but I'll still be just fine. So I based off of sound fundamentals, and then you don't have to worry about that. And, get home inspections. I still get a professional home inspection on every property I buy. I don't think I'm ever going to be too smart to not learn something new. And so if you take that attitude, I think you're going to be okay.
Yourself, open to learn a little bit more, learn from other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to not have shiny object syndrome too much, because you can get whiplash in real estate because, one day someone's like, this is the best strategy ever. And the next day it's another strategy. And so I don't chase too many rabbits these days, where it's like, if somebody brings me 100-unit apartment building, they're like, hey, you want to buy this? I used to pursue that, and I would analyze it for a week and try to turn over every stone, and then I'd figure out, it doesn't work for me. And I just wasted a week of my life. Now I'm like, just not what I do. Okay. I'll try to connect you with someone who buys those types of properties, but I am always interested. That's why I have the podcast, because I'm always interested in learning from other people, and I can incorporate aspects of what they do to improve my business. You will learn. I mean, if you're, even the oldest people that I've interviewed who have had the most success still say they learn every day in real estate. I think that's a great attitude to keep.
So keep learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of business, or how do you teach other people? I know you have the Living Above Rental podcast, and what do you teach people?
Yeah. So my coaching program is very specific. I've been teaching it for 5 years, and it takes someone who has no passive income. Maybe they're working a full-time job, but they don't have any passive income. From no passive income to finding and setting up their first really, really high cash flowing short-term rental. So it's a very specific program, and I personally work with every single person who's a part of it. It's a step-by-step process through the whole process of identifying the right market, the right type of financing, setting everything up, all your systems. And so that's my focus, because that's.
Do you think a different mindset, a different approach for this kind of business is necessary? I mean, people need to be in a different mindset to start this business.
What do you mean by different?
If they need to, I'm just starting this business, but I'm negative. I don't know if I want to learn. What kind of mindset do you need to be? Even for real estate.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the typical mindset, I saw this a lot when I was in the military. It was like the concept or the idea of real estate investing just was so foreign to people. They just thought, I'm in this structure where I just have to show up, check a box, work my 9 to 5, go home at night, and I'm going to do this until I retire someday, and then hopefully collect a pension, and that's it. Never even considered that there's another way to do things. And I didn't either until I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the thing that got me and gets a lot of people. And that was back in 2006 when I was starting in the military. And then all of a sudden I started noticing that I was thinking about things different than a lot of people around me. And I was like, I don't want this. I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And I realized there is a way. I don't know all the details yet, but just understanding that there is a way to live off your assets, have to work a 9 to 5 for the rest of your life. It's a powerful thing. So eventually we were able to get there. It wasn't overnight. But yeah, it requires you to just accept that you don't know everything and that there might be a different way. So once you start seeing that, there's people around me doing this, and so it's just a difference of understanding how to do it, it's really powerful, and you can start taking the steps in the right direction.
It's a very good answer. I like that.
Thank you.
If you have to start over, or if somebody, is going to start over in real estate, what would you focus on the next 12 months, let's say, or the next 6 months, 12 months, and start learning the business, or what would you learn?
I have recognized over the last few years that it's really beneficial to not think of yourself as a real estate investor, but to think of yourself as a allocator of capital. And what I mean by that is you allocate, everyone has limited amount of money, limited amount of capital. With the limited amount of money that you have, you put it toward the thing that's going to pay you the most, and also not have the highest risk, because you can go to Vegas and make a lot of money, but you're probably going to lose it all. So I want to invest it in things that have a high rate of return, the highest rate per dollar invested, but yet have a protected downside. And that's how I ended up landing on this strategy. It's not that I just absolutely love these properties or have some connection to them, but it's just the numbers just make so much sense. If you start thinking through that lens of for every dollar that I put towards something, I want to see the highest ROI on that dollar.
Okay.
It's hard to beat these types of properties, these small multi-units, because they're super affordable, but yet they bring in such a high income and then they
Yeah.
appreciate over time. So once you start thinking about yourself as an allocator of capital, you'll consider all the different real estate options out there and other options. You could put it in a mutual fund, you could put it in crypto, you could put it in all these things, but I would challenge you to compare the actual ROI on those things and see where are you most protected, and then also what has the highest ROI. I'd say that if I had to start over, that's again where I would focus. I'd probably end up back on this strategy, but maybe there's another one that I haven't explored that has a higher ROI and a better protected downside. But
Sure.
that's I think the smartest place to start.
Do you think real estate is still being one of the most lucrative ways to,
It also requires a lot more effort in most cases. There might be
Yeah.
some business you can fall into that no one's discovered yet and make a killing, but in most cases, it takes a long time to ramp up. And then the other thing is you don't have an underlying asset. You might create income streams, but I've talked to I'm friends with a financial planner who's worked with business owners for years. And he said that a lot of these people who have had successful businesses, the difference between when they retire poor and try to sell their business and they realize doesn't have as much value as they want, or
Sure.
retire rich is did they own the building that the business was in? Because if they operated the business for the last 20, 30 years and they own the building outright now because they paid it off, that asset of the building is worth so much more than the business in a lot of cases because the business depended on them.
Sure.
I think businesses can be a great way to make, but I'd say real estate is just tried and true, and we're always going to need a place to live. And so it just fundamentally makes so much sense.
No, it makes sense totally. Kirby, an upcoming project that you're more excited about it. What's next for Kirby Atwell?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I said, we just finished a 5-unit that I absolutely love. We're
Okay.
all into it for about $600,000. We bought it for $400, rehabbed it for about $200, or maybe $650. But it's bringing in now $150,000 a year. That type of income for that purchase price is just awesome. I just found one that's a 7-unit in a little bit more ideal location. So I've been working on trying to get this one under contract. Seller won't budge on their price at this point, but it's been sitting there for a little while. And
Okay.
yeah, hoping for that one. So, the more units, better up to a certain point. But this one is just set up really well for a short-term rental. And I'm hoping that'll be the next one.
Sure. What would you think would be your legacy? What do you?
Man, that's a great question. I think that the biggest thing is like once you start pursuing financial freedom, that's a great goal. It's super powerful. It frees up so much of your time. But once you get to that place, then the question is, is the goal to be able to do nothing for the rest of your life, just to sit around? I don't think that's like the reason God puts us on this earth, to just do nothing. Right? So I think the reason that you get to financial freedom is then now you can have a much bigger impact on the people around you. For me, I've worked with hundreds of people this strategy and changing that. People come back and say, it literally changed my life. I'm able to do things I wasn't able to do before. And so I think that's going to be the biggest legacy, because it's not overnight. It's not a get rich quick thing. But I think if I keep, I plan to teach this for the long term, and so it'll be awesome one day to look back after 20 years of teaching this and have lots of millionaires and lots of financially independent people that their lives have been changed, their family's future has been changed as a result. And so I think that would probably be a really cool legacy to leave.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. If you could speak directly to someone, somebody doubting whether, they want to invest, what would you tell them, with no filters, what would you tell them?
I have a lot of conversations with people who are nervous about it, which makes sense. And at the same time, they tell me all the things that they've figured out, like what's possible, what's not possible, how things are done. And at the same time, I've done things that are different than everything they're saying. They're saying, oh, this isn't possible. I've done what they say is impossible. And so I think the fear comes from you just don't understand everything yet, right? And I don't understand everything yet either. Like my worldview and your worldview, everyone, it comes from your experiences so far. So I think the biggest thing I would say to that person is just, so I know that it is possible, but yet I don't know how to get there. And so the how isn't clear yet. So that's what you just have to figure out. And instead of saying, this is what's possible, or this is what's not possible, or I have this figured out, say, how can it be possible? Like, what are the next take? What took somebody who's successful from where I am right now to where they are? And how can I emulate that? And I think if you change that, the world opens up. Like, you can do anything because it's just a question of figuring out the steps in between where you're at right now and where you want to get to. Most people think that they've got it all figured out already and they're boxed in and there's no other options.
Sure. Kirby, how do you define?
Yeah, owning your time. To me, having complete autonomy of being able to own your calendar. Autonomy is just no one telling you where to be or when to be. And so generally it's once your income exceeds your expenses, you get to that place. And if the income is consistent, it's not going away. Now you're financially free. And that mile marker can change a lot. All of a sudden your expenses could go up. It's not like a fixed thing for forever.
Yeah.
But generally that's, I think, once you get to that place, opens up a lot of opportunity for you.
How do you define success? 15 years ago was a different idea. What's the idea today of success?
Autonomy and impact are a success to me. Those two things. Yeah, I've thought about it a lot. And I think being able to control your days, because a good life is just made up of good days, right? Like, you don't just grind it out and are miserable for the next 50 years and then all of a sudden I'll retire and I'll have a good life. Sure. You had it pretty terrible, just we're miserable every day, right? So it's the ability to create good days and stack one good day after another and do what you love, what lights you up. And so a lot of times financial freedom really helps you with that. It can't buy it, you got to do the work and you got to create the relationships and, all the things that go into, and then once you get to that place of financial freedom, then it's impact and changing other people's lives. I think that's success.
Is real estate investing easy?
No, I don't think anyone who's actually done it would ever say it. I do think it can be more simple than most people think in terms of complexity does not equal higher levels of success. Somebody once told me, a mentor of mine, he said, if it isn't simple, it simply won't work. And so usually what I've found is that once people start trying to sound really smart and making something overly complex and saying, oh, you just don't understand it, here's all the crazy metrics that make this a good deal, go back to the fundamentals. Show me the key numbers, and does it make cash flow on a monthly basis? Is it going to appreciate over time? Don't show me IRR is going to be this in this many years. And that's usually when you're getting hosed. It can be simple. It does require effort. It require you to actually put in daily work. Yeah. So I think it's not easy.
If somebody wants to get to know you, get your coaching, find you in the social media, how can we find you?
Yeah, I'd say I'd love to talk to you. I mean, you can set up a call with me. Just go to livingoffrentals.com and that'll be with either me or one of my close team members. Most likely it'll be me who jumps on that call with you, and we can talk through any questions you have. Or you can go to livingoffrentals.com for it, and that's where that web class is that I just did that walks you through my whole strategy. So either way, I think those are the two best ways.
Great conversation, Kirby. We haven't talked in a long time, but you're killing it, and I love it. I love what you're doing. We know each other for a long time. And it was a pleasure, talking to you and have my community, the Latino community, looking into what's, all about in Airbnb. What can you say? Can you say something to the Latino community?
Yeah, I wish I had learned Spanish when I was younger. My kids are working on it now, and man, it would have just opened up so many doors for me. So I think that's I apologize, I guess, for not responding in Spanish to all your questions. It's a little rusty, but yeah, I'd say whether you're Latino or you're, any other race, religion, creed, whatever it is, it's an opportunity that exists for you. So don't feel like, oh, this worked for Kirby, but he's different than me. I mean, it works for anybody. So just take action and learn. That's what I'd say.
Great, great. Thank you for coming to FlipLatino Legendarios. It's been a pleasure, and it's always an honor to have a veteran and somebody I admire. In this, podcast in Spanish will be translated, so you'll be talking in Spanish probably.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming to this podcast, and we'll see you later. And I hope people enjoy this conversation. I learn a lot, and usually that's what we do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for having me. I love that you're doing this. You had really, really great question. Keep it up.
Great, thank you. See you later. And if you like this podcast, invite somebody to watch it. Thank you. Gracias. Thank you, Kirby.
Thank you. Talk soon.